Well, top of the hour, let's begin with the updates as far as when it comes to the ceasefire. Previously, that was announced by President Trump as it comes to an end. Now, what is being said that the ceasefire for now has been extended. Now, the U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that he will extend the ceasefire in West Asia. And taking to the Truth Social platform, Trump has now confirmed that the ceasefire will be extended until such a time that a unified proposal from the government of Iran is received by the Trump administration. And now this is coming at a time, as far as President Trump is of the opinion, that the mediation efforts that are undertaken by Pakistan and upon the request of their field marshal and their prime minister, President Trump of the United States have come to a decision as far as when it comes to the ceasefire extension is concerned. However, in that same post, he has mentioned that as far as the U.S. naval blockade is concerned, that will continue. So United States extending its ceasefire with Iran at Pakistan's request as he waits for a unified proposal from the Islamic Republic. Let's in the meantime take a look exactly what he has said as far as his Truth Social post is now concerned. He goes on to say, and I quote, that based on the fact of the government of Iran is seriously fractured, not unexpectedly so, and upon the request of Field Marshal Asim Munir and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, we've been asked to hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives come up with a unified proposal. He says that I have therefore directed our military to continue with the blockade and in all other respects remain ready and able, and will therefore extend the ceasefire until such time that there is a proposal submitted and discussions are concluded one way or the other. So as far as the extension of ceasefire is concerned, it remains indefinite. However, there is still uncertainty that looms large. But the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, that, however, will continue. So Srinjoy is connected with us, and Eric is also joining us live right now. Good evening to you, Eric, and good morning to you, Srinjoy. Srinjoy, a basic understanding now as far as the extension of the ceasefire is concerned, because the talks, the second round of talks in Islamabad may not happen anytime soon.
Yes, this was very, very important for the people of Iran, for the people of the Gulf states, and the people of Israel. You have seen the kind of death and destruction and damage that happened in the 40 days of fighting. That has to be kept in mind. And what if there's been another round of fighting had started? President Trump had already spoken about bombing Iran into the Stone Age. Then there was a statement about the end of a civilization and so on. On the other hand, the Iranians still have the missiles, still have the drones to attack the Gulf states and Israel. And what would have happened? Their desalination plants would have been attacked. The refineries would have been attacked. The oil wells, perhaps, the ports in the Gulf states, not to forget Israel, Haifa, Dimona, Tel Aviv, all of that would have come under fire. So for the people, the 90 million people of Iran, the 10 million people of Israel, and the millions, an equal number of people in the Gulf states and also Iraq, this is actually a relief. This is a lifeline. And they will hope that this ceasefire will continue, because for them, the uncertainty, the insecurity of war was something to contend with. Yes. Because they were first in line of the fighting.
Well,
that's
because
one.
As far as Pakistan is also concerned, Srinjoy, because that seems to be as far as a face saver that Pakistan really wanted to pull off, because Pakistan will not be coming to a decision until the time that it is dictated on part of the United States of America. So here is President Trump, who seems to be talking about Field Marshal Munir and Shehbaz Sharif, their prime minister, saying that on their intervention, on their request, he's decided to extend the ceasefire. Please do stay on with us, because we talk about the other aspect of the ceasefire, where President Trump, however, has mentioned that the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz will continue. And Iran, however, has come out to slam this blockading on part of the Iranian ports and has now called the blockade to be as an act of war. And Iran is now of the opinion that this is a certain ceasefire violation that is being committed on part of the United States of America. Let's break that update that is now coming in as far as the foreign minister of Iran is concerned. He has now come out to say and slam Trump, saying that blockading Iranian ports is an act of war and thus a violation of the ceasefire, and striking a commercial vessel and taking its crew hostage is another greater violation. Now, this is coming at a time when President Trump has announced that till the time a unified proposal is not kept in front of him on part of the negotiators there, and he, however, believes that when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, because, when it comes to President Trump casting the breakdown into talks resulting in Iranian infighting, adding that the Pakistani leaders have asked him to extend the truce. But, however, he says that the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz will continue. Let's go to Eric on this. Eric, waiting for a proposal to be submitted and to be discussed. However, who are the parties involved in this? And is this a pressure tactic that seems to be on President Trump rather more than on Iran that he seems to be showcasing? Because clearly, in a way, he had to extend the ceasefire.
Well, I mean, President Trump does have the clock ticking against him. We have midterms coming up, and that's something that President Trump is taking very seriously. So there is the time essence in play. President Trump did say today that he has patience and he has all the time in the world, but I don't believe that's the case. I believe that he wants to get something done sooner than later. However, I do think that he is taking the pressure off of Iran to allow them to figure out what route do they want to go. We are seeing a lot of mixed messages come out of Iran, and we're quite unsure as to what their actual position is. It seems like there may be 2 or 3 factions trying to make this decision, and it doesn't seem like they're all on the exact same page. So I think President Trump is just allowing them a little bit of time to kind of get their leadership together, on the same page in order to get a proper proposal sent out. Now, when it comes to the blockade,
yes, the
blockade is part of what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent described last week as the economic kind of counter to this war. And he's right. If Iran can't get anything out of the Strait of Hormuz, they're not going to be able to make money. So eventually, Iran's going to have a financial problem. And that could also help escalate into more, not war, but into more negotiations. I think that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep the economic
tensions, because that would mean a direct face-off with China also, because as far as China being the biggest buyer of the Iranian oil, and if the ships there, one of them that was seized was actually coming from the Shanghai port. And that, in a way, what, the Iranian foreign minister has now come out to say amounts to an act of war. So we're just going to put out exactly what Araghchi has been saying. And, taking the crew hostage, as he believes, is even a greater violation. Let's put out his statement of the foreign minister of Iran saying that blockading Iranian ports is an act of war and thus a violation of ceasefire. Striking a commercial vessel and taking its crew hostage is even a greater violation. Iran knows how to neutralize restriction and how to defend its interest and how to resist even when it comes to the bullying. So straight away going when he seems to be talking about as far as President Trump in this case is concerned, because the Strait of Hormuz, the blockade, however, Iran on its part has been saying that it is closed, but it is shut. There is still uncertainty over that, but there are reports of certain firing that indeed has taken place that also involved Indian ships. Let's in the meantime get you another round of breaking update this morning. What we are now learning is amid the escalating tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, President Trump's new warning to Iran, where he is now defending the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, says that no deal if we don't block Hormuz. And President Trump, however, has continued to say that till the time the naval blockade and the terms and conditions which favor America is not reached with Iran, then he's ready to blow up the country into bits, because he says that Iran doesn't want the Strait of Hormuz to be closed. They want it to be rather open so that they can monetize and make nearly $500 million every day, which is therefore that they are losing if it is closed. And they only say that they want it closed because I have totally blockaded it. He's closed it. So merely want to save face. And this is what President Trump has now been saying in his latest post, saying that people approached me for 4 days ago saying that, sir, Iran wants to open up the strait immediately. But if we do that, there can never be a deal with Iran unless we blow up the rest of the country and their leaders included, is what President Trump has been saying. And this threat, however, continues on part of President Trump, where he's also talked about, bombing Iran back to the Stone Age. But such kind of, as far as already Strait of Hormuz being blocked or opened, I mean, is there clarity on that front, Shinjoy? Is the Strait of Hormuz open or is it still blocked?
Well, first of all, there is a double blockade because the Americans have blocked all Iran ports. There is the Iranians are stuck because the U.S. Navy is outside every Iranian port. The Iranians, who had opened the port, the Strait of Hormuz for a day or two, have decided that, well, if our ports are blocked, why should traffic from other countries, the Gulf states principally, go through the Strait of Hormuz? Why should they benefit when we are losing? So they've decided that, well, we'll block the strait. And you don't even have to say anything. What happens is that if one ship is going through and it draws and you fire at it, even if it's small arms fire, as happened in the case of the Indian ship,
yes,
even if that happens, it's a message to ship owners, it's a message to captains of ships, it's a message to everybody that, look, if you're putting your very expensive tanker with lots and lots of oil in it through the Strait of Hormuz, and if there is an anti-ship missile waiting for it, then there's serious trouble ahead.
Yes.
It's catastrophic. If a huge super tanker gets hit right at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz, it will be catastrophic. And
yes,
in many ways,
because they are
it will,
sailors, not warriors. And no ships, no tankers, no company would be, willing to take that kind of a risk as far as when it comes to the attacks are concerned, because we've actually seen those pictures of Iranian attacks on tankers that they believe without gaining the kind of permission from the IRGC. In the meantime, let's get you a basic understanding as far as how multiple ships have now been asked to turn around or turn back by the United States Navy, because there is, as Tunjoy mentioned, a blockade on part of the Strait of Hormuz imposed by Iran, and there is another blockade that has now been imposed by President Trump, which is the U.S. Navy. Now, let's talk about when it comes to the seizure of the Iranian cargo ship, which is Tuska. And Tuska, however, that was seized in the Gulf of Oman, and it attempted, however, to evade the blockade. This is the theory that is coming from the Navy of the United States. Now, they believe that actions that has been taken up when it comes to the ship's seizure is lawful because, U.S. Marines who boarded that ship, several of the containers were checked. The ship was also disabled before seizure. And importantly, as far as this route of that ship is now concerned, because it actually departed from China, it was also docked at the Shanghai port. And then it had another pit stop that was in Malaysia. And from Malaysia, it was headed to Bandar Abbas, which is an Iranian port. So, Eric, does it mean that you are now involving China in this direct face-off?
No, I don't think it does. Just like with the attack on the Indian ship, did that involve India? No, not necessarily. Do we want to see these attacks? No. It's being reported that that specific ship here in the United States, that that ship was under sanctions. I don't know how true that is, but here in the United States, they are reporting that that ship was specifically under sanctions. So that would change the trajectory of how we view that. But what we're seeing with the blockade is, since the blockade's been put in place, 11 to 17% of the tankers are now being migrated to Venezuela and the United States. So President Trump is not going to be in a hurry to open up the Strait of Hormuz. He has turned that into an advantage to the United States. So the ball actually is, and the pressure actually is in Iran's court. We're making money off of this blockade right now. So
No,
Iran's
but
going to
how
have to figure
exactly
out a
is the
way.
ball in the president's court? Because Iran has now said that if you block the Strait of Hormuz, that when it comes to the alternative routes, is something that Iran will go ahead and blocking them. Then, will there be U.S. Navy escorts that will be giving that kind of assurance to escort even the ships when it comes to all around the entire Strait of Hormuz and beyond? What happens then?
I don't think President Trump's really all that concerned about the Strait of Hormuz. It's a negotiation piece. That's about it. It's the enriched uranium is what Iran really is holding on to. That is the real negotiation piece. We can divert. We put pressure on Europe to seek oil from somewhere else, which would be the United States. So that part of it is we're benefiting from. Iran's not getting tankers out. Other countries are not getting tankers in. They're going to find alternate routes of transport. So it'll be interesting to see what cards everybody plays in the upcoming few days. But I do see Iran at least requesting another visit to Islamabad here in the next few days.
Well, I don't know if that is interesting, but sure is unnecessary as far as when it comes to dragging several countries whose ships are blocked and this kind of economic crisis that are now being built in those respective countries who have nothing to do with this war. And however, when it comes to this blockade, however, it still continues. And President Trump is indeed in that kind of pressure that seems to be building up, because he was expecting and he was saying that he has no inclination when it comes to extending the ceasefire. However, he's backed on that statement already. So in the meantime, when we talk about, a day of mixed signals and mounting threats, the second round of US-Iran talks that remain in limbo, and adding to that uncertainty are comments coming in from President Trump, who says that Washington hopes to reach a greater deal to end the war. Iran, however, seems to be holding its ground, refusing any truce under pressure, under any shadow of threats. Meanwhile, Vice President JD Vance's departure to Islamabad has now been put on hold amid lack of clarity from the Iranian side over the second round of negotiations. Now, this is coming at a time when already the first round of talks, there was 70-member strong delegation from Iran that had reached Islamabad. However, this time there seems to be on a standby and a wait-on-watch mode. So who is now actually calling the shots in Iran? Because when we speak of the diplomatic channels there, and as far as the representatives of the Iranian side who were present during the first round of meeting was led by the Foreign Minister Arakchi, then Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf was also there. And as far as when it comes to the military core of the IRGC, which more or less have a bigger say now as far as the Iranian regime is concerned, well, that also has been playing a bigger role and in charge of the negotiations there. So second round of negotiations, which Iran believes cannot happen when it comes to pressure or under the shadow of threats. And when it comes to the talking points, Eric, because you mentioned nuclear dust without any financial assistance, as President Trump says that Iran is ready to hand over, Iran has rejected. Opening of the Strait of Hormuz, that hasn't happened. Lebanon, however, has been agreed in a separate ceasefire with Israel and with Lebanon. But in the meantime, when it comes to the ballistic program, also Iran has been rejecting that very claim, saying that it amounts to national security. So are these going to be the points again that would lead to, the second round of talks that actually did not happen? I mean, what are you now expecting Iran to do?
I'm expecting Iran to, when we go back and we look at the first round of negotiations, Iran seemed to be receptive to a little bit of give. It sounded like we were heading towards a final deal, within a few weeks. And then we had the Hormuz issue. So I think Iran is they want to get this done and over with. I believe that they want to get commerce moving again. I think Iran needs to figure out how to dial down their intergovernment issues in order to somewhat alleviate sanctions. I think it would be good for Iran to figure out a way to be unsanctioned in order to join the global economy. I can imagine it would be difficult to fully operate the finances of your country if you have more assets available to you. So I'm not real sure why
this is
they
something
stay
what
so...
President Trump mentioned, losing $500 million and that too every day is something which is not sustainable even for Iran in the long run. But remember, during the first round of talks, Iran had certainly set some preconditions to the already 10 conditions so that it agreed to come, on the same venue. However, they did not face exactly directly. But Vice President JD Vance, however, before departing Islamabad, however, did say that the talks failed, but we have given them the best possible offer. And if they accept, good. If they don't, then there would be consequences. Now, as far as the Strait of Hormuz is now concerned, as Eric was also pointing out, there seems to be a certain rift, especially when it comes to within Iran, because despite what President Trump has been saying, that there has been multiple ceasefire violations on part of Iran, IRGC seems to be firing on ships despite the talks happening. So the power center seems to be colliding. As far as the diplomats are concerned, they are pushing for de-escalation, but the military there, that seems to be driving the escalation, which is parallel to the chains of command, and there seems to be the problem that actually seems to lie with Iran for now. So what President Trump, however, has been saying that he's managed to change the regime. Well, that, however, hasn't happened. There has been a mere replacement. But for now, he seems to be happy with the current leadership of Iran. So what is now expected now in West Asia, with now both sides are playing hardball and yet to come to any agreeable terms of condition, because Times Now also had a word with the top American political scientist, Robert Pape, and he is now of the opinion, and he says an interesting prediction that he has to make on how long that he sees that this conflict will continue in West Asia.